going to adjourn our special meeting, opened earlier, to our regular meeting of the Larkspur City Council for Wednesday, June 21st. May we please have a roll call?
Councilmember Chu.
Present.
Councilmember Way.
Here.
Councilmember Morrison.
Here.
Vice Mayor Hilmer.
Here.
Let the record know that Mayor Haroff is excused.
If you're able, would you please rise and join us in our Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. Earlier we held interviews for library board seat and a Marin County Commission on Aging representative. Those appointments will be announced in mid-July. The next item on the agenda tonight are presentations. The first is a presentation from Vicki Kung of the Larkspur Chamber of Commerce, updates. Welcome, Vicki.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone. Do I have a...
Yeah, we're just loading this right now.
Okay. We'll have a PowerPoint here in a sec. Thank you, Vicki Kung, Executive Director of Larkspur Chamber of Commerce. Hello. I wanted to give you our quarterly update on what the Chamber is doing, what we've been doing with your money. Is the mic on?
Yes.
Yep. Okay. So I'm going to cover territory since what's been happening since I spoke with you in February. All right. 12 new members, which sounds like a small number, but it's a 31% increase. So now we're up to 50, which is great. 4 businesses decided to join us so they could participate in the Story Studio. More on that coming up. 4 joined to participate in the relocated wine stroll, and 4 came to us from endless invitations to come join the chamber. So all of the different outreach that we're using to develop members seems to be working. Story Studio is advertorial with SF Gate. It's paid. It's a story about the business neighborhoods of Larkspur. So I invited all of our businesses to participate. It's 14 members decided to do that with video and an interview, and they talked about what the chamber means to them. All of our members who were members at the time that went out, sort of end of April, are included as links, and then we divided into the 5 business neighborhoods. 500,000 guaranteed impressions on SF Gate. It stops next week, and then early July I will get the data on how that went. The click-throughs don't necessarily come through the chamber. They should all be driven to the members, which was the object of the exercise. And then it's an ongoing marketing tool for the chamber and our members. Once it's no longer featured on SF Gate, it becomes a persistent link that's available to us to use forever. And then the last sort of update on events is the wine stroll. We've relocated it from sort of the Lark Theater down to sort of Magnolia Salon. It's now going to start at King and go down to Madrone. That's because that's where the highest concentration of members is. We have 12 members there now. So it's going to be, so we've got 12 members and 13 or 14 wineries signed up to be hosts. So that's on the 15th. And again, the relocation of that worked as a member benefit, which our existing members understood, and for new members especially in the Lark Creek shops that hadn't joined yet, it was a great incentive for them to do that. And of course, it's our biggest fundraiser of the year. So we're excited. All right. I actually know how to drive a mouse, just not this mouse.
It's all left button.
See, that's what happens when you let a Mac person drive a PC. There we go. So this is what the story studio looks like. I used the content. The content was written actually by SF Gate. So I did the rough draft, and then their professional journalists went in and made me sound much smarter than I really am, and made Larkspur sound as wonderful as it really is. So I'm very pleased with that. Again, we've got now a video that, it's about a 2-minute video that we'll be able to use for promoting. It features some of our members, but it's also got some sort of B-roll of things like the ferry who are members and other spots of Larkspur. So it's a good tool that we can use. I see in my thrashing around with the mouse that I skipped a page. You guys have that in front of you. I wanted to talk about upcoming mixers and events. So Wine Stroll on the 15th, we're expecting 400 paid attendees. July 20th, you're all invited to the Marin Council of Chambers that's going to be held in Novato. And that's all of the chambers are getting together for an annual event. So that's the evening of July 20th. And I believe it's at Stones Tree? No, last year it was at somewhere else in Novato. September 19th is a North Magnolia mixer hosted by Hello Gorgeous. October 6th, the Spirit of Marin Awards, that's the big award, which is hosted by Bank of Marin. Our Larkspur Chamber Business Citizen of the Year is Helen Russell of Equator Coffees and Teas. The chamber board voted on that in February, and we're just now starting to go public with it because Bank of Marin likes to control the rollout of the PR on that. But Helen's delighted, and so are we. And then on October 27th is the Business Citizen Luncheon. We'll be having that at one of our member restaurants because now we have member restaurants, which is new in the past couple of months. I've got 2 ribbon cuttings in the pipeline, and then the Chamber's been asked to host the City Council debate. So we'll be looking at a date that works for everyone, hopefully in September. So I'll talk to the board, and then we'll get some dates and a location in front of you for that. There we go. That's the poster for the Wine Stroll. So we've got 2,000 postcards all over that are being handed out, and then 50 posters that are all over the place. And again, with the new location, it tightens up the route. It's all tasting stops that are members. Some members who don't like to have, red wine in their stores are still able to participate, and it's got some really nice buzz around the neighborhood. I also created marketing materials for the participating stores to send out to their own mailing list. So again, it's a member benefit that they're able to use to create some buzz around the event. And again, that benefits the chamber. The funds from that basically constitute our marketing budget, which allows me to do things like have videos made, engage in story studio, and some of the other things we've got coming up. Thank you. This mailer was intended to go out earlier, but once a story studio opportunity sort of landed in our lap, I decided to use Story Studio as the genesis for our content. So now that the content's been rewritten, and I have a really nice perpetual link to that, to the video, to the whole story, I'll be incorporating it back into this mailer. So that'll be a fall mailer after the summer's gone. And as a reminder, this goes to approximately 1,500 businesses that anyone with a business license in Larkspur. So it will probably go to current members, and that's okay. No harm in reminding them why they're members. What we want to do is capture people who may be small office, home office, people who are in an industrial area, people who don't have a storefront that I can walk into to invite. So we want to make sure we get as many non-high street members as possible so that the full business community is represented. Thank you. And then a recap of the return on investment. Basically, what the city gets for its money is now we've got 50 members. We're starting to really build up a head of steam on being able to be a vital voice for the business community in Larkspur. And again, there's now a revenue stream, so we are able to do things, make appropriate investments in the running and the management of the chamber. So it's all a very positive thing. And then, of course, what the members get is primarily at this point marketing opportunities. We give them opportunities to talk about themselves, which seems to be top of everyone's mind. I also continue to negotiate discounts and work with local press to make sure that we've got marketing opportunities and discounts available to our members. So that's what we're up to, and I welcome any questions.
Catherine has a question.
Vicki, when you gave your presentation, I think last year we were talking about the so many small businesses in Larkspur are home-based or consulting businesses or home-based businesses, and one of the opportunities was to try to reach out to them. How's that going? Is that?
That will be that mailer. I realized that it was a little content light when I really put it together. The content wasn't quite sexy enough to be a compelling selling piece, so I put that on the back burner until the Story Studio content was developed. Now I think we can tell a better story as a chamber about Larkspur and about the value of the chamber. But we need to engage with the small office, home office people for sure. So that's a key. Once school starts, that'll be a key element of the fall marketing campaign.
Well, I joined because of your efforts.
Thank you.
And the second question is, it's $10 a month still. Is there discussion of if that's the competitive amount, or should we talk about increasing that, or do you think that that's a good price point?
I would stick with that at least through the first half of 2018. There doesn't seem, people that are never going to join are never going to join, whether it was free or $1,000. It didn't. So I think I'll get a better sense of price resistance once we get to more the small office, home office people. Right now, we're lower than any other chamber. And that was appropriate when we were in the initial reboot mode because we didn't have a lot of a pool of members to offer for networking opportunities and all of that. But I'd say by this time next year, it's something that the board should definitely look at.
Okay.
And if it comes up, sooner, I'd certainly be willing to do that. Absolutely.
Other questions for Vicki?
Thank you.
Thank you so much,
Thanks,
Vicki.
Vicki.
Great job.
Thank you.
I'll see you at the wine stroll.
I'll see you all at the wine stroll. Yep.
Next item on the agenda is a presentation by Julian Skinner, the Director of Public Works, fixing our roads and maintaining essential local services. Welcome, Julian.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, council members, members of the public. Julian Skinner, Public Works Director for the City of Larkspur. Just going to quickly change presentations. So what I'm going to share with you tonight is a presentation that we've been out with the community with. We've had a series of community meetings where we've exchanged some information with the public based on some survey results from earlier this year, primarily around the condition of our streets and Measure C. Some of this information is going to look familiar because the condition of our streets is a theme in our budget presentations, and so you've seen some of these slides earlier this year in budget presentations. Okay, so we start out the presentation with kind of a summary of what our goals and the priorities are at the city. And so we're looking at protecting the city's local services, which is our fire and our police, and our infrastructure, which is streets, storm drains, street lights, things of that nature. And based on feedback that we consistently get, and even more so this winter with all the rain that we had, is the public's expectation that we provide streets for them to use that are in a condition that are as safe as we can make them, and that we address pothole issues in a timely manner. And through all of this, we want to be fiscally prudent and make sure that we're spending the tax dollars in the best manner possible for the longevity of this infrastructure and these services for the city overall. So this slide just shows some of our infrastructure. Bottom left picture is a pothole. That's typically what a lot of our phone calls are about, again, as I mentioned, this winter. The enemy of the roads is the traffic that uses them and the water that gets on the road from both above and below. And so with a wet winter, we see increased potholes. And then the picture on the right is part of our paving project last year using Measure C funds that I'll talk about a little bit later. We were able to pave some of the streets in the city. And then the top right, and actually the top left too, is our storm drain. So one of our kind of forgotten pieces of infrastructure, because it's not seen every day, is a storm drain. And so these are the pipes that are underground that carry the drainage runoff. So when it rains, the rain goes into the gutters and the catch basins that you see on the street, and it ultimately goes into these storm drain pipes that are under the street and convey that water out to the bay. A lot of these pipes haven't been touched since they were installed, so they're 50, 60 years old. And you can see very clearly the conditions of the road as you drive on them. The conditions of these storm drains are more hidden, but still aging infrastructure nonetheless. Some facts about our streets. So overall in the city, we've got just over 32 miles of pavement. So if you took all of our streets end to end, you'd have a line that was about 32 miles long. It's just about over 4.5 million square feet of pavement. And every 2 years, the city's pavement is rated. So we actually go and physically inspect every street and document the conditions, the cracks, the potholes, the alligator cracking on these streets, and they get a rating. And it's a national rating system on a scale of 0 to 100, where 0 is a really bad failed street. Practically down to gravel, no asphalt left, and 100 would be a street the day after you pave it. And so overall, the average pavement condition index for the city of Larkspur is a 42, which is considered poor on a scale of 0 to 100. For a comparison, in the Bay Area, an average of all the other entities is about a 65. The goal of where you would like this number to be is up in the 80s, and a lot of agencies strive to get up in the 70s. And I'll get into the reason why. Again, it's not just a number later on in some of the slides about what this pavement condition index means. Obviously, a 42 being low means we have lots of cracks and potholes, but it also means that it's more expensive to maintain and fix our streets. And so, as I mentioned earlier, we did have a community survey earlier this year, and the residents did identify deteriorating streets and potholes as one of their major issues of concern. So again, this is just the overall pavement condition rating showing going from a level of 0 to 100. Newer streets, the green area is where you want to have your streets, A, because they are easier to drive, safer to drive, less potholes, but also because they're less expensive to maintain. As you start getting into the lower categories, the costs start to go up and the condition of the street worsens and you have more and more potholes. So we're not in the very worst condition, but we're close. We're in the yellow area at that 42. So what are some of the things that we've done to try and address this poor pavement condition? So back in 2013, the voters did adopt Measure C, the 5-year local sales tax, and then council subsequently adopted a policy for spending the majority of those funds on the paving program. And the importance of a fund like Measure C is that it's local funds that we control. It's not like other funds that come in from national or from state grants and other funds that we don't have control over, and some of those programs change over time and we can't really count on those funds in the long term. As great as Measure C has been, and it's injected about $1 million a year into our paving program, one of the issues with having an overall pavement condition index so low is even that amount, the $1 million a year, is not enough to get us out of that low rating. We're at such a poor condition overall that we would need to do something in addition to what Measure C has done for us over this 5-year period to get out of that low PCI and get our streets up to a point where they're in better condition and less expensive in the long run to maintain. But we have been able to show some measurable results with Measure C. We have 2 completed years of paving program with those funds, and we have another one that is just about to get underway. Next week you'll see Gelati Construction throughout town starting our annual paving program in the Palm Hill and Heather Gardens neighborhoods. And then there's another 2 years planned after that with the Measure C funds. So we've done some paving on Magnolia. Last year we paved Larkspur Plaza Drive, done some sections of Madrone. We're basically doing a section of Madrone each year, gradually making our way up the canyon. And then some streets such as Bertano Way up in the Greenbrae Hills. So as I mentioned, despite our best efforts and despite adding this Measure C funding into our paving program, we still have some of the worst streets in the Bay Area, in Marin County and in the Bay area. And I'll go into a couple of graphs in a minute that'll kind of explain why some of these conditions exist. But essentially, it's the point that the worse condition your streets are in, the more expensive it is to maintain them. On an extreme case, if you can get your streets up into those 80s levels, you're looking at maintenance treatments that are way less expensive than when we have to fully replace a street, where it can cost about 40 times as much to maintain those older streets that are in poor condition versus a newer street. This slide looks at a 5-year paving program with different amounts of funding. The very bottom line represents if we decided to not invest any more money in paving. And the bar basically shows what that PCI, or the pavement condition index, would be, tracks it over 5 years, shows that it drops down to about a 31, so currently at 42. If we did nothing to our streets for 5 years, that condition would drop down to a 31, which means more potholes, more cracks, and then again, more expensive, a bigger hole to get out of, and more money would be needed to better the condition of the streets. The next lineup, which is kind of the gray one, shows a PCI level of 40 in 5 years. That represents our current funding level. So that shows $1.5 million a year. That's roughly $1 million a year for Measure C that we've had over the last 2 years, 3 years. And then the other $500,000 is a combination of gas tax and county transportation sales tax. The next line that's yellow, a little hard to read, is it projects the amount of dollars it would take to maintain our PCI. So we're at 42. What would it take to stay at that same level? And the program shows that it would cost about $1.8 million or $1.8 million a year just to stay at a 42. So the current level of funding we have, even with the Measure C at the current level, is not able to even maintain our streets at the current 42 level. So then moving up to the top, the red line is the optimal if money was no object. This is what MTC would recommend we aim for, and that gets you up to a PCI level of 82. The next two are things that we've looked at for what a paving program for Larkspur could involve. And this is setting a target pavement condition index somewhere in the 60 to 70 range, ideally 70. And again, what this would mean is that we would be able to pave way more than the 3 or 4% of streets that we're currently able to pave with our funding level, and get to most of the streets that would need to be paved over the next 3 to 5 years, get that PCI level up to 70, where that from at that point forward we'd be able to do much more cost-efficient maintenance on our pavement. We wouldn't be digging down 12 inches like we are on some of the streets this summer. And so the numbers work out to, if we wanted to make it to a PCI 70 in 5 years, it would be an average spend of about $5 million a year. If we aimed for a PCI 60, it would be an average of $4 million a year to get to that level. And again, talking about these numbers, one of the reasons why we want to get to these levels, not only does it reduce the amount of potholes and cracks that we have in our streets, but it makes it less expensive in the long run to maintain that infrastructure. And so just picking a couple of these scenarios, so the bottom one in the text at the bottom highlights the amount of money it currently would take for us to stay at the PCI level of 42. If we were to invest $1.8 million a year, we would expect our pavement would stay pretty much citywide in the same condition it is now. We would still get to pave 3% to 5% new streets every year, but the other 95% of those streets every year would go untouched and would be deteriorating over time. Whereas if we were to elevate our PCI up to the 60 or the 70, our annual maintenance cost from that point forward actually goes down significantly. In fact, for PCI of 70, it would be less than $1 million a year to stay at that PCI level of 70. And then if we aimed for the 60, it would be about $900,000 a year to stay at 60. And so the reason for this is called the pavement curve. Essentially, when you pave a street, it stays in good condition for quite some time. But then it's kind of like a snowball effect. Once you start to get a few cracks, the water starts to get into the street. And once you have one crack, it makes it easier to get another crack, and they kind of propagate. And so there's a point in a pavement life where the condition of the pavement really starts to tail off rapidly over time. And so the goal of a pavement program is to be able to maintain your streets and address them when they're still in fairly good condition, and it's way less expensive to maintain them at that level. And so the flatter area of the curve at the top represents the early life of a street where it's a few dollars a square yard to maintain that street in that condition. Once you start getting to an age where the pavement starts to crack and you're not able to address those cracks and the cracks start to multiply, then the condition starts to tail off, and then you're starting to get into the $20, $30, $40 a square yard repairs, where you're not just treating the surface anymore. You've let the condition get to the point where it's affecting the base of the street, and it's akin to painting your house versus having to go in and redo the foundation and rebuild your whole house. So there's maintenance you can do in the early years to keep it in good condition, to reduce your costs in the long run for maintaining that infrastructure versus just leaving it and spending it in one chunk, but a much bigger chunk later on. So moving on to the storm drains. And so the storm drains have a number of functions. One is obviously they keep the floodwaters off of our streets. So when working properly, they take the drainage from the rainstorms and they funnel it to the bay. The other thing that they do, if they're properly maintained and configured, is they help keep the bay water clean. There's mechanisms in the storm drain that filter out impurities, and so a good maintained storm drain is able to function properly in storm events and is also able to keep our bay clean. So that's one of the reasons for maintaining the storm drains in addition to the pavement. We also mentioned at the beginning essential city services, and so some portions of Measure C have been spent on clearing some roads for fire access, and then also to pay off over time a loan for an additional fire truck. And all of these things are interrelated. So the better condition our streets are in and the storm drains underneath, and that we can keep the roads from getting flooded and we can keep them in good condition, then it provides better avenues for our emergency services when they're responding to events, that they don't have to worry about the roads being flooded or potholes that they can't see because the road is flooded and there's significant issues underneath. And so when we're talking about dollars out in the neighborhood, we often get the question about how does that relate to what the city spends overall. And so this is the pie chart from this year's budget that shows the allocations to the different departments throughout the city. And as is typical with most, your emergency services are the biggest pieces of the pie. In our case, fire and police. There is a slice of this pie that shows public works streets. This is our operating budget pie. So this is not the Measure C money. This is the day-to-day maintenance that we do on our streets. So we have a maintenance crew that are out there filling potholes, refreshing striping, painting curbs, things like that. That's this chunk of money. So given the feedback we've received from residents, what have we been doing to move forward? And so we have had this series of meetings where we've engaged the public and tried to get the message across about how we've been doing what we can do with the funding levels that we have to maintain our pavement structure. A lot of folks are shocked at how much money it costs to maintain the paving, but it's really a condition of where we are overall. It's that low level of 42. And looking at all of those streets that are in those lower levels that are going to be expensive to rehabilitate. We're going to have a lot of streets that are going to be like Madrone, where we're going to have to go in and do some significant repairs. But we've heard a lot from residents on projects that it's great. They're happy when they see that we're investing money in Larkspur and we're paving street, but they'd be much happier if we could pave their street, or if we could pave a street that's part of their daily routine of where they travel throughout the city. And based on the current funding mechanisms we have, you know, we don't have answers where we can project when we're going to be able to get to every street in Larkspur. As I mentioned, with the current funding levels, the streets continue to get worse and worse over time, and we're only able to pick off up to about 5% of the streets overall each year. So there's the majority of streets we're just not getting to. And with the current funding level, we're not really able to confirm with folks when we think we'll be able to get to those streets. And so I mentioned the survey before, and so some of the feedback we got from the community survey was 71% of likely voters said that they would renew Measure C at a 3/4 cent level for the purpose of accelerating fixing the streets and knowing that streets were going to be fixed sooner rather than later.
Yeah, a portion of that's lost in the subtlety of all this is how many years are you talking about when you said the public that was surveyed is in favor of 70 or 3/4 cent? Because the subtlety that's lost is that in order to pave all the roads at once, it's got to be financed. So that means having a longer revenue stream of more than just 5 years.
I'll chime in here. So the survey asked voters if they were comfortable in the renewal of Measure C, if Measure C was changed so that the voters could terminate Measure C at any time by vote. And so that it would switch to that rather than have a fixed time horizon to it. And so that would allow the city to contemplate borrowing with that sort of language.
So it would be a 3/4 cent in perpetuity?
Well, again, not in perpetuity, because it would empower the public to undo the tax at some future date if they wanted to.
I'm not following this because normally you would say, okay, we got 3/4 cent in this, you know, right now it's half a cent for 5 years.
Right.
So are we saying 3/4 cent for 20 years or?
So again, if you look at what Nevada did, they actually just did this. And so under their language now, there's no specified time. There's not 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. The voters can initiate the termination of the tax and get it put on the ballot to end the tax. And they could do that on any year on any ballot if they go through the process to initiate it or petition the council to do it. So it changes it from a fixed time period to a time period based on the public.
Until revoked.
Until there's a vote.
Right. So what happens if we take out financing based on a future revenue stream of 20 years and someone decides to put it to the voters to revoke it after 10 years?
So the city, if the city commits this money to that sort of scenario, then the measure has to stay in place long enough to fulfill the city's commitment and obligation. And so under the scenario you're describing, it wouldn't end until the obligation was paid off.
Okay, so that's kind of built into whatever is structured.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I think we're down to the last couple of slides. And so, again, the message we've been sharing with the public when they have had questions about when can my street be paved is that we would need to restructure our current paving program and essentially look at something that could address every need within a 5-year period in order to be able to give them a date certain on when they might expect to get pavement improvements on their street. And so, in these meetings, we've been asking folks to let us know if they have any questions or concerns about our paving program, what we've done, what we're looking at doing moving forward, and try to find out if there's any other groups that they think we should be going out and exchanging information with. We have been uploading some of this to our Fixing Our Roads website. If you go to that website, there's some information on there on some of the projects we've completed with the existing Measure C money. There's also information that's being updated on a weekly basis about this year's paving projects. So folks that live on streets that are being paved this year, that's your website to go and get information on the latest schedule from the contractor. And then there's also some information on the survey that was done earlier this year and what we've done with Measure C and what a 5-year paving project might look like moving forward. And then that is my direct line up there for any members of the public that have any questions about our paving.
Thank you very much, Julian. Are there questions from the council for staff or Mr. City Manager? You had a comment?
Yeah, I just want to underscore a couple of things for the public in particular. The council's taking up the issue of what might be on the ballot at its July 19 meeting and a special meeting on July 26. And before that happens, the staff is available to provide this information to the public. We're recording this, and this will go up so that folks can watch this video. But if there are entities out in the community or neighborhoods, if they want to contact Mr. Skinner or me, we'd be happy to arrange a date and a meeting place to hold more meetings. We're available to do that and happy to do that and provide this information and answer questions.
From the council, Councilmember Morrison.
So I was going to share that too, Dan. If anybody in any neighborhood would like to have a coffee or afternoon get together to have a Measure C update, I know that our staff would appreciate that. I know I, for one, am going to have one sometime in July. Let's see. I know we talked about storm drains, but I don't remember how many miles of storm drains have you not investigated that you don't know what conditions they're in?
So over time, we have been video inspecting some of our storm drains. Of the 15 miles that we have or think we have, and again, part of the issue is some of the pipes are undocumented, and this past winter, we found some pipes we didn't know we had. So of the 15 miles that we have, we've, over the last 10 years, videoed about roughly around 5 miles. Yeah.
Other council questions? Catherine?
Thanks, Julian, for this presentation. I got a letter, I remember, as a homeowner on Palm Hill last year outlining that this streets were going to be done, and it suggested people have lateral lines and driveways redone before the street paving comes in. Are we seeing an uptick in permit requests for lateral lines? Or I know we don't handle lateral lines, but driveways and things?
Not so much, and we do actually even see the lateral ones because they're still required to come in for an encroachment permit, even though that's they also need a permit from the sewer district. But no, we typically send out a couple of advance letters to residents just letting them know that we plan on paving their street because we do have a 5-year moratorium where we don't allow pavement cuts once we've paved the street. So we do suggest to folks that if they think they have issues with their sewer laterals or they have driveway conforms that they may want to address, or if they're contemplating any building improvements that may trigger sprinklers that would require their water service to be upsized. These are all things that a lot of people may not think about when we're coming to pave the street, so we try to give them a little bit of heads-up notice. And I know the sewer district has had a program in the past where they've worked with some of the homeowners on those streets. I don't have any statistics from this year's project, though.
Yeah, I think that's real important to keep that in the front and center for people, because I know when that first letter came out, I had several neighbors say, oh, we got to get our driveway done, and of course they haven't done it yet. So thinking about how we can encourage those type of improvements before we start tearing up the road. Okay, thanks.
Other council questions? Thank you very much, Julian.
Thank you.
Are there members of the public that would like to ask questions or make comments on this agenda item? Hi, Cindy.
Hi. Cindy Winter. Thank you. This is a terrific presentation. I couldn't think of a better one. And I would like more people to have an opportunity to see it. I've talked with friends and people I meet about Measure C, and there's a lot of apathy out there. People are busy. I don't know what it is, and I'm concerned that not enough people will understand what's going on. And so the Chamber of Commerce speaker suggested the city council debates. I think that it should be arranged that that would be front and center as a super topic. And I was thinking about homeowner meetings. Our condominium association is sort of passive there. Often it's a board of directors, these are the activists, and the others, the other owners, residents don't pay much attention. However, many of the HOAs have their annual meetings in October, and it might be important to try to contact the larger ones. I have a tenuous connection with Cape Marin. Cape Marin and probably Rose Lane have private roadways, but they have to leave those roadways to drive on the public roads. And I'm sure that many of them are cognizant of South Aliso and North Magnolia and Madrone, maybe not Madrone. Also the Greenway Property Owners Association, and maybe hand out some leaflets at the 4th of July parade if that's appropriate. I think that if there were a brainstorming session, we could make a long list and go out and contact people. And if we got half of those organizations to accept what we propose for a meeting, I think that would be good. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Are there other members of the public that would like to comment or ask questions on this item? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is public comment. Are there members of the public that would like to make comments or ask questions regarding items not on this evening's agenda? All right, seeing none, the next item is approval of the consent calendar. Are there items on the consent calendar council members would like to remove for discussion? Councilmember Chu.
Yeah, I'd like to remove item 4.8 on the city's response to the grand jury report on affordable housing.
Any other items to be removed for discussion by council members? All right, we'll pull 4.8. Is there a motion to approve the balance of the consent calendar?
I'll make that motion.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second to approve the balance of the consent calendar minus 4.8. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Would it be staff's pleasure to discuss 4.8 now or hold it till later on the agenda?
We'd be happy to
All right.
address on
Councilmember Chu, you may lead it off.
Okay. In the report from the grand jury, there's mention of junior second units being affordable. And we learned from our most recent discussion approving junior second units that that is not a requirement at the state level. So the way that the grand jury report reads is that they're assuming that it's going to be affordable. And our response to that also talks about affordability. So I don't want to lead the public or the grand jury to believe that junior second units in Larkspur will be affordable unless a homeowner chooses to make it affordable.
I'll speak on the general part of this, and then if Mr. Toff wants to weigh in later with technical. The challenge with this particular grand jury report is that they're mostly using the word affordable in a colloquial sense, not in a legal sense. And so they tried to explain that by saying they were talking about housing affordability, not affordable housing, but then they vacillate because there's times when they want to talk about. I think what staff tried to do is, as best we could, is steer whenever we could back to this concept of housing affordability, because that seemed to be what the grand jury actually wanted to talk about. And for the benefit of the public, the distinction here is the grand jury seems to want to promote there being more housing on the market to bring the cost for everybody of housing down, which is different than affordable housing, which is using government policy to suppress the cost of certain housing for certain people of certain incomes. And so I appreciate what you're saying. I think it was our intent to just sort of follow their lead. I don't think we were intending to suggest that junior second units were affordable units in the legal sense, but more in the colloquial sense.
Yeah, but now you bring up another comment they make, and I consider it sort of a fallacy in that if you were to build enough homes that it would make it affordable. But the fact is, if you look at the zoning for the whole county, it's probably not attainable to build an adequate supply that would bring it down to the point it's affordable in the short, medium, and I would guess in the long term.
Well, I mean, I think, you know, basic economics are in play here where what the demand is versus the supply you could possibly achieve. I think what you're alluding to is you can't provide enough supply to actually affect bringing the price down given that demand is so high.
Yeah. Because what we've tried to do through public policy is to at least give some people the opportunity to get a home that's affordable. But the cyclical nature of this is that Marin is such a highly desirable area that if you increase the supply, you would probably just as equally increase the demand because of the proximity to the city as well as just being in this beautiful natural setting.
Well, I think we're seeing what you're saying play out in the new apartment complex in Corte Madera. It's bringing a significant amount of supply online, but commanding prices that are eye-opening even by Marin standards.
Mm-hmm. So what would you suggest about the response in terms of, you know, the comment I just brought up?
Well, now I think it'd be better if I turn over to the planning director.
Yeah.
Well, no, I think you're getting at something that we kind of debated. It was very challenging writing this and not kind of weighing in or wading into the greater philosophical debate of how to solve the housing crisis. I mean, the report makes recommendations that have some level of validity, and I think there are some things we can say, well, that's a good idea, and things where we actually do to some degree. But the whole concept of building your way out of the housing crisis, building your way to drive down the market prices is very challenging, obviously, for a location like Marin or the Bay Area as a whole. Part of what makes this place attractive and special to live in is its character, and just building lots of housing can affect the character. And then, of course, we have transportation issues, traffic issues that's related to that, and that's why, the report really doesn't go into other measures that are being taken throughout the state by, we do have housing elements which attempt to address this. We've got Plan Bay Area, which is looking to focus jobs near housing and reduce traffic demand. So there's kind of a whole smorgasbord of responses one could have to this. And in responding, we really said, let's just look at the recommendations and try to respond to those directly in terms of what Larkspur is doing.
Yeah. So specifically with that recommendation, it really wasn't talking about junior second units. It was talking about the, let's just say, inducements or incentives to remove some of the planning barriers associated with affordable housing.
Correct. I think, they're reflecting a statewide movement to look at junior second units and accessory units as a means of creating more affordable housing within the built communities.
Right. But since you can't do that,
Yeah.
then my suggestion then would be just to remove your example of using JSUs as part of the planning inducements.
Well, I think only what we're reflecting is that it is a form of streamlining. If you're really looking at increasing housing stock as a measure, as a way of assisting in creating affordability, not necessarily affordable, but depending on how you use the term, you're increasing some level of affordability for housing within Larkspur, within Marin County. We do use second units are measured in the reporting to the state on how we are meeting our goals in the housing element. So, excuse me, while they're not all deed restricted in that way, junior second units, particularly junior second units, are seen as a way of potentially increasing more, whether it's affordable, whether it's actually technically affordable, at least improving affordability within the neighborhood. Those are seen as a way of improving your housing stock.
Yeah,
It's
and
more affordable than single-family
I'm wondering
development.
if I could chime in. I'm in reviewing our letter and responses. I think to assuage your concern, Councilmember Chu, there's 3 instances on. I'm looking there. It's recommendation 6. They're not numbered, unfortunately. So second to last page. There's 3 instances where affordable housing is stated that I think in all 3 cases, if we changed it to housing that is more affordable, we would get out of this conundrum of suggesting that we intended to identify junior second units as affordable housing.
Yeah, and I would actually, you're on the right track there. I think what Neil was saying earlier about increasing housing stock, because even in our housing element, we had originally gone into that thinking that JSUs were going to be address the very low income category at 50%, when in fact it won't achieve anything at this point unless somebody voluntarily does so. So I think if the language were to reflect that, yeah, with that type of housing, we can provide some administrative review of it that removes some of the planning barriers that would still allow for increased supply of housing, then you're not speaking about affordability, because JSUs will not provide affordability.
Yeah. I think we could probably adjust this, and as I said, just with some slight language changes. And if the council's comfortable, if we could take direction to do that.
Yeah, I'd be fine with
because
that.
I'm concerned about meeting the deadline to respond to the
I don't
grand
think you
jury.
need to come back to us, but just that we've had this discussion for clarity.
And I think now you've given us a chance to editorialize for a second, and building on the comments you've made, I think one of the challenges with this grand jury report is it's playing to a theme that's emerging across California right now, that government regulation is the reason there's not enough housing supply. At least in Larkspur, it's not the process or regulation in and of itself that's the reason housing does or doesn't come online. It's the limited opportunity which we tried to explain in the letter. And then the fact that we value the ability of the public to discuss the impact to the entire community of new projects coming online. And I think right now it's gaining traction to vilify that as a function of process rather than recognizing that as part of local democratic procedure. So.
Well, there are a lot of things in the report. I got a whole page of my own notes that I think I can editorialize on. I mean, it was very single-dimensional and didn't even look at the economics of multifamily versus single-family going back to the 1980s, which in large part also contributed to this.
I think when you retire from this role, you have a grand jury opportunity to join.
Oh, yeah. Right.
I would find it helpful to make reference when needed within the text to make sure that it's understood that this is intended to be consistent with state law, so that the definitions of affordable don't confuse the use of the word affordability.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Any other discussion on this item?
No.
If not, I'll.
Yeah, I'll move to have item 4.8 approved with modifications at the discretion of the staff to address my comments.
Thanks for bringing that to our attention. I'll second it.
Is that clear enough direction?
Yes, thank you.
There's been a motion and a second on item 4.8. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the city manager's oral report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members, Mr. Vice Mayor and council. First, just I've noted this in the last couple of meetings. It's good to note again that we have canceled 2 of your regular meetings that are coming on the schedule. There will not be a meeting on July 5th, and there will not be a meeting on August 2nd. There will be a special meeting on July 26th, and on the agenda that was published, it was mistakenly listed as July 29. It's Wednesday, July 26th is the special meeting date. So folks should take note of that. Wanted to let the community and council know, and I think we talked about this briefly once before. We are aware that a lot of our curb paint has faded quite a bit, particularly in the hard rains of this year. We had to wait till we were confident we had consistent dry weather before we could schedule curb painting. So we're talking white curbs, red curbs, and yellow curbs. That painting is going to start here in the next 10 days. What we will probably be doing in some areas that we recognize will be a little different in the past, we will be doing some of the painting in the nighttime hours at 2 or 3 in the morning. We have equipment. I can't promise it's 100% quiet. It's not particularly loud. It's we've tested it. The reason we're going to do that, particularly in the business district areas, is so that the painting doesn't interfere with parking opportunities during business hours. And so, particularly in Magnolia, where we have mixed use, some of the apartments may hear the truck going by that has the spray motor. But we're going to try that this year, see how it goes. We haven't done this before, but we think it'll be a lot less disruptive to our business community to do that. We won't be doing that nighttime painting in the residential areas, just in some of our business corridors, to give that a try. Folks may have seen some flooding signs out in the community, and some folks may have wondered why, since we are in dry weather. We are experiencing our summer king tides, so we actually have some very high water levels right now, and as the council knows from our winter issues and challenges, some of our storm drains get covered. Some of our outlets that release water out into the creek, they do get water in them when the king tides come in, because the king tides are actually higher than our outlet gates. And so if you saw a flooding sign out and we're wondering what's going on, it's just that those tides have brought some water in. They've overwhelmed the outlet systems, basically come up through them, and we need to let that water subside. The good news is summer king tides tend to happen in the middle of the night, so the flooding tends to be in the early morning and subsides before most folks have to deal with it. But that's why you might have seen those signs out there. There's an article in the Marin IJ. It's online. I think it's probably in tomorrow's print, about the two transportation agencies of Sonoma County and Marin County applying for a bike share program grant. Want to remind the council that your staff signed a letter of support for that program. There's not a cost impact to Larkspur, but the idea is to put the initial run of the bike locations would be around train stations, so we would be a community that would benefit and experience the bike sharing program. So we hope that they're successful in pursuing and getting that grant. Want to ask folks to continue to be patient if you're driving in the Doherty corridor, particularly in the 8 o'clock hour. We started Super Cool Summer School this year, and we're having it we're having it at Hall Middle School for the first time. And we're learning how to direct traffic, and we have a lot of parents who are not accustomed to going to Hall, and they're learning how to maneuver around Hall. You know, the veterans, they know, but some of our parents who have younger kids, it's their first time sort of understanding the loops there, and we definitely have had some backups as parents are getting the hang of driving through that corridor. Super Cool Summer School is a huge hit, and if you go over to Hall Middle School, it's a bit crazy in a positive way with a lot of frenetic energy. We're going to add to that next week because the Giants camp will be in Piper Park, so we'll have even more kids in and around the area. So it's an exciting time, and if you council, I want to reiterate that Recreation Director Dick Whitley be happy to give you a tour of the summer school at any point. And then lastly, as the council knows, we're still out seeking a new permanent city clerk. We've been fortunate to have Michelle Winterbottom on board as our interim. She did warn me that we probably need to deputize a few individuals to be assistant city clerks or deputy city clerks because we're about to enter the election season, and since she's not here full time, we need to make sure there's always somebody present to pull election papers. So I guess it'll probably end up being me and one other staff person. We haven't figured that out. But we'll make that announcement, and we will make sure that as we enter the season to pull papers for the city council election, we do have folks who can handle that. So with that, I turn it back to the council.
Questions of the city manager on his report?
I have.
Catherine?
Several days a week I leave to head to the city at around 5:30 in the morning, and Corte Madera has been doing a lot of work on Tamalpais. They're out there working or setting up to start work, it looks like, at 6 a.m. Is that applicable for us, too, that we can start work a little early on big street projects, or is that a decision that...
The council's empowered the public works director and the city manager to allow the city to work outside of the restricted hours. I don't know the specifics of why Corte Madera has chosen to do that. We have not ever, we've tried to avoid that as much as possible because of the impact to the residences.
Just wondered. It's heavy work. I mean, they've got big trucks out and doing everything. It looks like it's starting about 5:45 in the morning. So.
Yeah, I just don't know all the details there. One thing I will say is, you know, one of the challenges for us is, say, on Magnolia, which would be probably somewhat comparable in terms of the type of street, the echoes.
Oh, yeah.
Travel pretty far and pretty wide, so we don't always just affect folks who live right near the work, but some of that work at that time in the morning, we'd hear from a pretty wide radius. Yeah, so.
Councilmember Morrison.
Dan, how long is the street painting the curb painting going to take? How many days do you predict? Julian, do you know?
For the total program or just in the night?
2 a.m.
Oh,
How
I
many-
think they're doing one night.
Oh, just
One
one
night.
morning.
Yeah,
Okay.
just to try it, yeah.
See how it goes. Okay.
Yeah,
great.
and it's really to try it in the business district to see how it goes. Yeah.
Other questions for the city manager on his oral report? All right, thank you very much, Dan. The next item on the agenda are council members' reports and comments. Any council member reports? Catherine?
I have a few things I wanted people to know about. The first is that the Twin Cities Disaster Preparedness Committee has reinitiated itself, and my co-chair is Bob Ravazio. So we're back to meeting monthly, and a lot of new attendees, and I think we're going to see some real positive things coming out of that. And our next meeting is in the 11th of January. So it's turned out to be a very large group this time, and I'll be continuing to report on that. The second thing I thought was important, and I'll probably give this to Neil also, is that at the DC3 meeting, where I'm the representative of the Marin mayors and council members, there was a presentation by Ben Berto, who's the principal planner for the county of Marin, about post-disaster temporary use ordinance. And it was the first presentation to the group about creating a new ordinance for the county properties in which they can streamline building permits, can do temporary use structures and all sorts of things to respond quickly after a disaster. It was a first reading of that, and it's actually modeled on other ordinances that allow planning departments to streamline processes so that you can get the neighborhoods and the city back and more resilient and faster. So the goal is to have it passed within the county and then to bring it to each city. So just giving a heads up on that. And I'll share this with you, Neil. I don't know if you had seen that, but this is the example of the ordinance, and we may be asked to consider that in the years to come. And then lastly, I never got a flyer for it, but our assembly person, Mark Levine, is having a Twin Cities community meeting this Saturday at the Corte Madera Community Center from 10 a.m. to 12 noon, and it's open to the public. I'm unable to attend, but I just want to make sure those of you who are interested to have an opportunity to talk to Assembly Member Levine. It's this Saturday in Corte Madera. Did anybody else get a flyer of that? I must have come when I was out of town. Okay, and that's all. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. I just have one item. At today's Sonoma Marin Area Rail Transit Board meeting, the board adopted a resolution to fund the beginning of the engineering, design, and construction for the Larkspur extension to the tune of $36 million. So the work has begun on that. All right. Any other council member reports and comments this evening? All right. We'll move to the next item on the agenda, which is we'll open a public hearing. This is item 7.1. It's introduction for first reading and adoption of an ordinance amending the precise development plan and amending ordinances number 923 and 947, development standards for the Drakes Cove residential development, 33 and 35 Drakes Cove lots 22 and 23. Jeffrey Lawrence of Nuvera Homes is the applicant. Drakes Cove Ventures is the property owner. May we have a staff report?
Good evening, Vice Mayor Hilmer and members of the council. I'm Lorraine Weiss. I'm planning consultant working with Neil Toft on this project. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of background, a little bit of history, since this goes back quite a while. In November of 2002, the City Council first adopted Ordinance number 916 that approved a preliminary development plan for the Drakes Way, Drakes Cove project. That included 23 market-rate housing units in a single family that are all single family and detached, and one duplex building. The precise development plan for Drakes Cove was then subsequently reviewed and recommended for approval by the Planning Commission in June of 2003, and then approved by the City Council in August of 2003 with the adoption of Ordinance number 923. In April of 2005, the Planning Commission reviewed proposed subsequent revisions to Ordinance 923 for some corrections to calculations and data for approved site layout, grading, landscaping, and floor plans. the City Council then adopted Ordinance number 947, which amended the precise plan approval in August of 2005. So this evening, we have a request, and the proposal includes replacing the previously approved duet or duplexes with 2 detached single-family homes. The proposed design change would position the upper level of the dwelling at the street. With this change, the massing is broken up, and the homes are more visible from the street rather than just the garages and the rooftops. With this change, the applicant is requesting an amendment to the Drake's Cove development plan. They include several different items. I'm actually going to allow the applicant to go over these particular design issues. It is important to note that there are a few items that are a little bit unusual with this particular application. The approved precise development plan actually did not identify specific grade totals for each property. In addition to that, the original home designs were based upon an aerial topographic survey that did not accurately depict the slope of the properties. As a result of it, the approved plan layouts were poorly suited for the steep hillside conditions that existed, and many of the sites required deeper excavations and taller foundation walls than were depicted in the original approved development plans. Lots 22 and 23, which are the subject of tonight's design proposal, meant that staff encouraged a design approach that would break up the massing of the original duplex and better step up the hill, reducing the sheer verticality of the original design approach. In terms of parking, the previous parking arrangement had 2 garages with long driveways for guest parking that were in tandem. The project proposes garages that are closer to the street with shorter driveways and the guest parking at angles and not entirely in tandem relative to the garages. The driveway and guest parking arrangement on Lot 22 would occupy nearly the entire HOA easement dedicated for common area landscaping. There are 4 guest parking spaces in the common area at the entry of the cul-de-sac across from lots 20 and 22. We have a homeowner's maintenance easement that crosses the properties. The previously approved plans included the easement with landscaping and entry steps and a full flight of stairs to the front door of the dwelling units. This design shifts the homes up the hill closer to the street level and creates an encroachment into the 10-foot HOA easement for the driveway and parking for residents of Lot 22. As a result of this, the applicant is requesting elimination of this easement on the Lot 22 frontage. So there are a number of amendments to the development standards for the Drake's Cove precise plan that are required in this proposed development. I would urge you to refer to Attachment 5, which incorporates the draft ordinance and text amendments. I'm not going to go through each one of them. The Planning Commission reviewed this proposal on May 23rd. After I provided an oral presentation, we had the applicant's presentation, and they also incorporated 18 letters of support for the project, and these were all from property owners in the Drake's Cove residential development. There was no public testimony. The Planning Commission did discuss the proposal and voted unanimously to recommend approval of the draft ordinance authorizing the precise plan amendments. So staff is recommending that the City Council introduce and waive the first reading of the ordinance, which would be Ordinance 1018, amending ordinances number 923 and 947C and adopted, which could be adopted at the next meeting. I'm available to answer any questions, and the applicant is here to provide a presentation on the design proposal.
Are there questions of staff on the staff report? How many members of the public are here tonight to speak on this item? All right. Question of staff? Catherine?
Hi. So lot 22 and 23 are the only ones that are left to be developed in there. So what is lot 24, which is private common open space. Where is that located?
It's actually lot 24.
Because if you look at on the cover sheet here, on the bottom left column, it has 24 lots, and that's a private open space. And I just was curious as to where it was, because I don't see it anywhere.
No, that's actually off the site. It's either the knoll that contains the, I believe it's the knoll that contains the
Power lines?
the power lines. Yeah,
Okay. So that's,
that's actually, yeah. See, the knoll that contains the power lines is open space. It's kept within the property, and then up above the property is land that was granted to the city. Open space up on the hill behind the lake.
so my question was really whether that is a developable parcel, but it doesn't. If it's got the power line here, it doesn't look like that will be
Well,
developed.
number one, it has the power line. It's a very steep, challenging knoll, and it was kind of, as part of the precise plan, it was offset as open space.
I see, okay.
So one would have to amend the precise plan to attempt to develop.
Okay, so these are the last two. All right. 'Cause
That's
that-
correct.
Other questions of staff on the staff report? All right. I'm sure you can give us a concise presentation.
I will try to. Pull that up. Oh, can you hear me okay? I'm not Jeff Lawrence. I'm John Thatch, the architect on the project. Jeff, unfortunately, is on a plane to Hawaii right now and could not attend.
Too bad.
But I think, again, he would say, like me, we're very happy to be here, for the last two homes. We think we've made improvements on the plan. I'm partner in Dahlen Group Architects, and we've been involved in the project, not at the precise plan, but right after that. So we've been involved in over 10 years. We've seen all the things we've talked about as far as the retaining walls, things that happen in the field. And I think this is the first time these two homes that we've actually sort of been able to take the time, get the right, grading plan, everything else, look at it, and I think have a better plan for everybody for this. I think it's sort of obvious with all the residents, all the current residents who live in, have written letters and recommendations that they agree with what we are doing. Some of the things that I guess I'd like to say we're doing to echo what the planners have talked about is we have pushed the houses back into the hill and up the street. They're still under the height limit and everything else as far as how they work. But by doing that, we have, I think, less of a massing. We've separated the houses so there's not a big roof form in the middle. They break down in the middle as far as how the roof shapes, so that creates, I think, a better articulation. And we've also created a lower terrace with a strong stone wall as opposed to what you see here, with the column. So I think we have a stronger base, and also that helps create more separation from our neighbors below. It also does something that I really like as far as architecture, of really creating a strong base for a house. The house really feels like it belongs to the ground. And I think these two houses, they have that sense as far as how they fit, and they fit into the ground, the stone base to the homes. And again, something I'm really happy about, to take this opportunity with Nuvera Homes to be able to do something on these last two lots and fit in within the spirit of what was the precise plan, but also I think create something that's very valuable for everybody and something that's reflective for all the neighbors. Some of the other things maybe to talk about, again, the homes are set back, they're tucked more into the hill. I think the retaining walls, yes, there's retaining walls, but the way the retaining walls work now, they work and they're more like the iceberg situation as far as how they're not seen, they're really into the hill. And the one also mentioned that some of the things we were able to do, I think, is also articulate the architecture more. Making them two separate buildings, again, brings the roof down, set back, and we can create different levels in the house, and I think create more articulation in the architecture. The other item that we're looking at is also being the last two homes and maybe having a chance maybe to do something a little different. We're looking at these homes maybe a little more contemporary. They're the last two homes, but they still fit in with the character of the massing of the homes. The colors, the materials are very similar, but just a little bit different, a little simplified. Look at how we look at the windows, maybe how we look at the stone, and a little cleaner line as far as the detailing of the homes, just to be a little bit different, the two last homes. And we think this will add value to the whole neighborhood, having a little bit more variety. And I think one of the other items that was talked about was when these houses are pushed further up, we actually have a front elevation now. So I don't know how many of you looked at the old elevation. There's sort of a garage, and you have to take the stairs. You have to go find the front door. You don't have to find the front door now, and it doesn't increase the massing of the homes. And I think the homes are real exciting inside as far as how they open up and really use the views. There's increased landscaping as far as this submittal, as far as the back between our neighbors. And I think the final thing to say is I think this adds sort of the cake or the top of the cake to the project, and something I think we're very proud of and I think is add value for everybody in this neighborhood. And I'm available for any questions. Yes.
I have a question for you.
Mhm.
I was here for the original approvals.
Yes.
And the idea was to, at the time, this was a very impacting
Yes.
project. So we were trying to manage, the collective impact and minimize, the massing by having
Right.
a pattern on the hill that wasn't interrupted. How do you feel about having the top homes now kind of stick out as opposed to blending away?
I don't know if they stick out. I guess my feeling is I think we have more articulation. We have more variety. I guess I'm looking at, this mass here, and I feel like, again, with the roof and the way it comes together, I guess I don't think it'll stick out, and also I don't have the columns. I have a better base to it. I have a lot of different things that are going on now that improve it. And I guess, again, the way the landscape and everything else can work. And I think some of the things you're not seeing fully in this one is how the building angles and does different things that it didn't do before.
Are the elevations you have there on the bottom, are those kind of apples to apples in terms of
Yes.
scale?
Part of what happens here is, like we talked about, the living spaces here are 8 feet further out than here.
Yeah.
So it's pushed back into the hill. We have, pulled these terraces out, so that how they work. So, be honest, the overall height is less than it was before if you measure to this here.
That bottom downslope measurement?
Right.
Well, what I'm wondering is and I'm not trying to be negative here.
No,
I'm
it's
just
fine.
trying to process some of my thinking.
Okay.
The overall width of the two homes versus the duplex previously, the overall length of the mass is longer.
Yes.
Like
It is.
95 to 71 or something.
There is more space if you look from here to here as far as how that works.
Yeah.
What we're trying to do in this drawing here is trying to be realistic in that if this was pulled out farther, yes, it would be bigger, but this is sort of like I said, when you look at both of them, this one's further down the hill, so it's going to
It's more frontal, yeah.
So I think it's part of the perspective that you're seeing by the house being pushed back.
Okay.
But yes, the homes, as far as together, are probably about 8 feet.
But you're
Wider.
confident that this wouldn't be a disruption to the kind of texture that we're trying to create on the hill?
No, I guess I'm very
spacings and
comfortable.
all that
I
kind of stuff.
guess my feeling is I think, I guess I like how this is going to work. I think it's going to be, to me, add more articulation and everything else we're doing. I guess I'm happy. I guess I would, and I think it adds more value to the neighborhood also at the same time.
Well, I appreciate the downslope improvements that have been made. We're just always trying to protect our original intent.
Can I ask a question of the applicant through the mayor? So just so I understand, because this kind of came to our attention with sort of the question of the width, the comparable width of the two elevations is what you're showing as the existing approved elevation, which is really more of an iterational study that we had considered to really help match the kind of designs that were going on with the rest of the site. That's reflecting actually being more forward. So scale-wise, it's reflecting just that it's a closer building.
Correct.
The width isn't exactly measured the same. Therefore, so if you were to actually move it back or to match it to the other elevations, it is going to be narrower from one side to the other.
Correct, but then it wouldn't be right this way.
Correct. Okay.
Yes.
Just wanted to make
Yeah, I
sure.
just wanted to say
Because
that.
when you look at the two massings, one looks larger that probably wouldn't really be larger.
If you did a straight elevation of them with no perspective and everything else, yes, the one on the right's not, it's going to look wider.
Right. Okay.
But I appreciate also that you pulled everything back closer to the street, so.
Yeah. And I think it does a couple different things there. Basically, it pulls it back more distance, living space to living space from our neighbors. And it also, again, if you look at the elevations, which we didn't do at the beginning, it was just a garage at the front. And I know the intent was about how can this work with the slope? How can it work? And I think, again, I think we are doing all of that.
All right, I didn't mean to monopolize your time. Do you have other comments to make?
I think that's pretty much it. Again, it's something I think we're keeping in the character of what was doing. We wanted to separate the homes, and I think we have something that's a little softer and more articulated and a little bit, a little more unique, but still keeping with the character of the overall project for the last two homes.
Are there questions of the owner's representative here? Catherine?
Thank you, and the drawings are fabulous. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
I went and went up there this afternoon just to have a look at what's going on, and there's a lot of work going on the other two buildings. I think it's 20 and 21.
Yes.
So from looking at it and sort of going around in that neighborhood, it looks like the residence at number 3 is going to have the greatest sort of impact on this. And you have, just visually, you have a letter from that resident, I think.
I believe so.
Diane Titus.
Jeff, yeah, I think
Okay.
we have letters. My understanding is from every resident who's living, who's moved in.
It said 14 out of 18, so I was just seeing if there were any additional ones. But I recognized in here that there was a comment that some are not currently living in that area.
I couldn't answer that. Jeff,
Okay.
unfortunately, the person to answer that's on a plane.
All right, because that looked like the house that's definitely directly below these two
But
dwellings.
my understanding is that those they have, but I can't state for sure.
Okay. And they're I know this is in part of the literature too. How far apart are they? That just out of curiosity, because the space between the two ones.
They're 10 feet apart.
Okay. Hard for me to tell when I was standing there.
And if I can,
And there's good separation between 21 and 22. There's more of a separation.
Yeah,
than
that was obvious from that.
yeah, they begin at 10 feet apart and then kind of splay out as they come further down the hill.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if you look at it, there's only a small section where they're 10 feet apart. It's probably about 30 feet of the length that's 10 feet apart. Then it
Okay.
spreads out.
Other questions of the architect? Are there members of the public that would like to make comments or ask questions on this agenda item? Yes, ma'am. Please identify yourself for the record.
Good evening. My name is Patricia Olson. I'm a resident and homeowner at Drake's Cove at number 28 Drake's Cove Court and the beautiful community that Nuvera has built. And I'm also the president of the Drake's Cove Homeowners Association. And if I may, I'd like to address your question. Number 3 is owned by Diane Titus, whom I've personally spoken to, and I know that she is in support of the project. And we do have, Jeff did collect 18 of 18
Oh, good.
letters, so we do have those if you need any supplements. As homeowner and resident at 28, my husband and I would like to give our support to Nuvera Homes for the changes. We think the aesthetics are far superior to what the original plans showed, and we like that it is not going to be a duplex, but rather 2 separate houses. As president of the Homeowners Association, I can tell you that Jeff Lawrence was available at every homeowners meeting, prepared with plans, and opened himself up to questions from the homeowners, and a number of homeowners stayed to talk to him about that. He further left a set of plans with me, and I let everybody know they could come review the plans at my house, when we could make an appointment to do so. The feedback I have received has been unanimously positive from everybody in the community. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your comments. Other members of the public that would like to make comments or ask questions on this agenda item? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the City Council for discussion.
I just have to say I'm quite relieved and was pleased. I also went to go look at the homes. They're beautiful. The views are spectacular. But I ran into a neighbor who was very enthusiastic, like yourself, about the project. So that was quite a relief to also hear it from you. So thank you.
Other council discussion on this item?
Councilmember Way was just asking how it affects our housing element. I believe it's already been included in prior years.
Yeah.
But just just to straighten that out for me, because I wasn't around at that time, is that, so we had duplexes, which then had 4 possible residences.
Yeah, actually, the development had 5 duplexes down below, or 5 in total, and then the rest were single-family homes. 4 of those were developed. Those are the ones you see right above Sir Francis Drake. And they kind of, you'll see there's sort of a break wall in between them. And then this was going to be the 5th duplex up on the end of the court.
So by changing over to single-family homes, we're not affecting our housing element numbers?
No, it doesn't. No,
Okay.
these are all market rate units. We don't have that much of a challenge with meeting our market rate development.
Thank you.
If there is no other council discussion, I'll entertain a motion.
Move to introduce and waive first reading for the adoption of Ordinance 1018. Yeah, I'm doing it by memory. Okay. Yeah, that's okay. Didn't have it directly in front of me.
And I will second that motion.
We have the proper identification of the,
Do you
All
want me
in
to read-
favor?
we have a motion and a second.
Yes.
All right.
10.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you for your work.
Nice job on that.
Yes, thank you. They're beautiful.
And
I did because I couldn't find the number.
And one thing just to add on in terms of the housing element, this project actually is, I'm not sure if we explained it in here, this project is actually the basis of the Drake's Way housing on the other side of the RVSD. That was land donated through this housing. So that's how this project met its housing requirement.
Yeah, the whole thing was 50% affordable, which was a big plus for the city in terms of it. Wasn't a big number for total units, but percentage-wise for development, it was pretty high.
And this is the finale.
Yes, this is the
All right,
bow
thank
on
you.
the cake.
Thank you, everyone, for your participation this evening. Next item on the agenda are business items, which are none. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
All those in favor of the, is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor of the motion say aye.
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 Thank you very much. We adjourn at 8:04.